What if the true cost of luxury wasn't gold, but blood? From tycoons who died in shocking twists to celebrities whose indulgence turned deadly, these chilling tales reveal how excess often leads to tragedy. Over the next 2 hours, we'll uncover the most disturbing deaths ever linked to greed, wealth, and luxury. Hold tight, because these stories are as haunting as they are unbelievable. This is 2 hours of most disturbing deaths linked to extreme luxury. November 8, 2020, in Harare, Zimbabwe. Genius Kadungure, known to many as Ginimbi, had just left his mansion in Domboshava. He was driving his Rolls-Royce Wraith, a car worth about $500,000. It was around 5 a.m. Ginimbi had spent the night at Dreams nightclub, which he owned. The occasion was the 26th birthday of Michelle Amuli, better known as Moana, a growing influencer and fitness coach. The plan was to continue the celebration somewhere else, but they never got there. Earlier that night, Ginimbi posted a video on Instagram. He appeared lively and excited. He posted that they were going out to pop champagne. That was his last post to his more than 600,000 followers. In the car with him were Moana, Malawian businessman Limumba Karim, and a woman from Mozambique identified only as Elisha. Karim was wanted in Malawi for his connection to a 2013 government fund scandal involving more than 24 million British pounds. He had moved to South Africa to avoid being arrested. Witnesses said the group seemed happy and intoxicated as they left the club. The streets were mostly empty. As they drove along Borrowdale Road, a man named Danny Kuwanga saw what happened next. He said Ginimbi's car passed him at high speed and then tried to overtake another vehicle. That's when it collided head-on with a blue Honda Fit coming from the opposite direction. The Rolls-Royce spun off the road, hit a tree, and burst into flames. The Honda Fit was damaged on one side, but its driver and passenger survived with only minor injuries. The scene around Ginimbi's car was far worse. Kuwanga said the crash was so intense that Ginimbi was thrown from the car. He landed nearby, conscious but clearly in distress. Kuwanga and 3 others helped move him from the wreck. One witness said Ginimbi was shaking and calling out for help. Within 5 minutes, he lost consciousness and passed away. The other passengers were trapped inside. The impact had jammed the doors. People nearby could hear them screaming for help as flames spread. Bystanders tried using buckets of water and tree branches to control the fire, but it didn't work. The fire grew too quickly. Moana, Karim, and Elisha could not escape. Their bodies were burned beyond recognition. Emergency crews spent hours recovering them from the wreckage. The police later confirmed the deaths. A statement from Assistant Commissioner Paul Nyathi said the vehicle caught fire after colliding with the Honda Fit while trying to overtake. Moana had made a name for herself in Zimbabwe's entertainment industry. She was featured in music videos and was active on social media. Her father, Mr. Ishmael Amuli, was heartbroken. Their relationship had been strained after she separated from her husband in 2017. He said he disapproved of her lifestyle, which he believed went against their faith. He raised 5 children on his own after parting ways with Moana's mother. Karim's background made the crash even more controversial. Though his exact role in the fraud case was unclear, his name had long been tied to missing public funds. Elisha's full identity remains unknown. Ginimbi had become one of Zimbabwe's most well-known figures. He started his business at 17 and built a fortune between 7 million and 76 million British pounds, mostly through gas and petroleum. But he was better known for his wealth and luxury cars, Lamborghinis, Ferraris, Bentleys. He often threw lavish parties, some costing up to $50,000. However, he had also been investigated for financial misconduct. Police had seized several of his cars over unpaid import duties. At the time of his death, one Bentley was still in police custody. He was also related to Mary Mubaiwa, the estranged wife of the country's vice president. The crash stunned the nation. Crowds gathered at the scene. Public figures, fans, and close friends came to mourn. His sister Nelia and manager Shally were deeply affected. Funeral plans were underway for all 4 victims. Moana's burial faced delays due to religious customs and family disagreements. The police continued their investigation, though it was clear that speed and reckless driving were factors. One witness said Ginimbi tried to help his friends, but the car exploded before he could. That morning, 4 lives were lost in an instant. Just hours earlier, they were laughing and celebrating. Then it all ended with fire, chaos, and silence. On a quiet Sunday afternoon in June 2023, a private jet sliced silently through the skies above Virginia, veering dramatically off course. On board were 4 people: Adina Azarian, a prominent New York real estate agent, her 2-year-old daughter Aria, their nanny Evadne Smith, and the pilot Jeff Hefner. And none of them could stop the bizarre and horrifying trajectory of the flight, which would stun aviation experts and leave a trail of heartbreak across several families. At 49, Adina was widely known in the real estate community for her professionalism, passion, and persistence. She had spent over 2 decades building her career in Manhattan before expanding her business to the Hamptons, where she worked with Keller Williams. Her listings often spanned the $1 million to $3 million range, reflecting both her success and the trust clients placed in her. But her personal story carried a quiet poignancy. Adopted at 40 by John and Barbara Rumpel after a chance encounter, Adina had found something she longed for: stability and unconditional love. The Rumpels, who had lost their own teenage daughter in a tragic scuba diving accident in 1994, embraced Adina as their own, finding solace in her fire and determination. For Adina, it was the family she had yearned for after a turbulent childhood. Adina was also a mother. Aria, her daughter, had been described as a miracle, born after years of fertility struggles and miscarriages. The two shared a close bond, strengthened by the presence of their devoted nanny, Evadne Smith, who lived with them and played a key role in Aria's upbringing. The weekend trip to North Carolina was meant to be a simple family visit to the Rumpels, a short escape before returning to their home in East Hampton. On June 4, 2023, their jet, a Cessna 560 Citation 5, departed from Elizabethton, Tennessee, en route to MacArthur Airport in Long Island. The pilot, 69-year-old Jeff Hefner, was highly experienced, with a background as a captain at Southwest Airlines and over 25,000 hours of flight experience. But approximately 15 minutes into the flight, all communication from the cockpit ceased. Air traffic control made repeated attempts to reach Jeff, but received no response. The aircraft continued flying on autopilot, climbing to 34,000 feet and maintaining that altitude as it passed over its intended destination. Then inexplicably it made a near 180-degree turn, flying directly back over Washington, D.C., and entering restricted airspace. Military officials quickly dispatched 6 F-16 fighter jets at supersonic speed, resulting in a sonic boom that rattled communities across the region. When pilots intercepted the jet, they observed the captain slumped in his seat, unresponsive. None of the passengers inside the cabin appeared to be moving. At 3:22 p.m., after hours of silent flight, the jet entered a rapid spiral descent, falling at over 30,000 feet per minute, before crashing into a remote wooded area near Montebello. The impact was devastating. Emergency responders arrived on foot, only to find the aircraft had disintegrated. Nothing larger than an arm remained of the wreckage. No one survived. The National Transportation Safety Board later concluded the likely cause of the crash was incapacitation due to hypoxia, a lack of oxygen caused by a loss of cabin pressure. Investigators noted that the pilot had not brought supplemental oxygen on board, despite known issues with the plane's pressurization and environmental control systems, including a missing oxygen mask on the pilot's side. These maintenance problems had been noted in the days prior, but showed no evidence of repair. The report emphasized that symptoms of hypoxia are subtle, varying from person to person, but deadly if left unaddressed. The tragedy stunned all who knew the victims. Adina's colleagues described her as vibrant and dedicated, someone whose presence elevated every room she entered. Evadne, a constant and loving presence in Aria's life, was remembered for her warmth and care. The Rumpels, who had already endured the unbearable loss of a daughter decades earlier, were once again plunged into grief. In the days following the crash, the grief stretched across families and communities, from Adina's biological relatives, who had recently begun healing old wounds, to her adoptive parents, who had found new joy in her and Aria. The crash not only marked the end of 4 lives, but also left behind aching absences and unanswerable questions. For those left behind, the memories of Adina, Aria, Evadne, and Jeff are all that remain. January 2022 in Voula, a seaside suburb south of Athens, Greece. Zortsis Monoios, a 45-year-old businessman from Mykonos, had just picked up his brand new red Ferrari 488, which cost around £250,000. It was a car he'd looked forward to owning, a sleek, powerful machine. That evening he took it for a drive for the first time. His wife, Athena Kontopanou, was in the passenger seat. Zortzis wasn't just a businessman, he was well known across Greece. Back in 2003, at age 23, he appeared on the Greek version of the reality show The Wall. At the time, he was a computer science student. His calm demeanor and appearance made him stand out. He even had a brief relationship with fellow contestant Sissi Giannakopoulou, which didn't last long but kept him in the public's memory. After his time on television, Zortzis moved back to Mykonos and launched his own clothing brand, Georgie, opening 2 stores. The business took off, and he became a familiar figure both to locals and tourists. He and Athena had 2 children and lived a quiet family life. But that night, things went terribly wrong. Just 3 kilometers, or under 2 miles, from where he picked up the car, Zortzis was driving along Constantinou Karamanli Street, close to Pigodakia. The road there is coastal and narrow in places. At some point, he reportedly tried to avoid a pedestrian. In doing so, he lost control of the vehicle. The Ferrari veered off the road and slammed into a tree. Witnesses said the engine roared loudly just before impact. The crash crushed the front of the car, and it caught fire immediately. Greek singer Stan, who had been driving behind them, saw the crash happen. He rushed to help. Athena had been partially thrown from the car and was close enough to be pulled away. Stan managed to get her out just before the fire spread. She collapsed nearby, seriously injured. Zortzis, however, was still inside. A relative following in another car also ran to help but couldn't reach him. The flames had spread too fast. Zortzis was trapped behind the wheel and couldn't be saved. Video footage taken by bystanders and later shared by Greek news sites showed the Ferrari completely engulfed in flames, reduced to blackened metal in seconds. The drive had lasted only minutes. Emergency services responded quickly. Firefighters put out the fire and recovered Zortzis' remains. Athena was taken to the General State Hospital of Nicaea. She survived, but her injuries were serious. Police began an investigation right away. They reviewed nearby camera footage and reconstructed the events leading up to the crash. There was no evidence of another vehicle being involved. Early reports suggested Zortzis may have reacted to avoid someone on the road, and the Ferrari's power, combined with his inexperience behind its wheel, might have played a role. The crash left a deep impact on the country. Zortzis' sister, Katerina Monogios, a member of parliament with the New Democracy Party, received countless messages of support. People remembered Zortzis not just for his time on television or his business, but for who he was. Some reports claimed Zortzis was thrown from the car. Others said he was trapped inside. What's certain is that the Ferrari was destroyed in seconds and he didn't survive. Athena lived thanks to the efforts of those who rushed to help. Her condition remained uncertain in the early days, but she pulled through. 3 years later, Katerina spoke publicly. She said their family was focused on raising their children with memories of who he was, gentle, calm, and well-loved. The investigation is still open, but the early findings suggest that no other car was involved. Just a moment of reaction, a powerful car, and a road that didn't allow for mistakes. In 1999, Payne Stewart was at a high point in both his professional career and personal life. Known for his flamboyant attire and graceful swing, the 42-year-old golfer had recently secured his 3rd major title at the 1999 U.S. Open, completing a remarkable comeback after years of struggling on the PGA Tour. As he boarded a private jet from Orlando to Dallas on October 25, 1999, Payne was en route to Houston for the Tour Championship, poised to conclude a triumphant season. But the flight would never reach its destination. What began as a routine journey would unravel into a haunting aviation disaster that left a deep scar on the sports world. William Payne Stewart had long been one of golf's most recognizable figures. With 11 PGA Tour victories, his career spanned more than 2 decades. His 3rd and final major came just 4 months before he boarded the private jet. Beyond his achievements, Payne was beloved for his showmanship, colorful clothes and ivy caps, and for bringing personality and tradition back into the game. Off the course, he was a devoted husband and father of 2, enjoying the peak of both fame and family life. On the morning of October 25, 1999, Payne boarded a Learjet 35 operated by Sunjet Aviation, alongside his agent Robert Fraley, Van Arden of Leader Enterprises, and golf course architect Bruce Borland. Pilots Michael Kling and Stephanie Bellagarig were in the cockpit. The jet departed Orlando at 9:19 a.m. local time. 8 minutes later, the aircraft received clearance to climb to 39,000 feet and acknowledged the instruction. That radio call would be the last communication ever heard from the plane. 6 minutes later, air traffic control failed to reach the aircraft for a routine frequency handoff. Repeated calls went unanswered. By 10:52 a.m., fighter jets were dispatched to intercept the plane, which had continued to fly unresponsively on autopilot. A test pilot in an F-16 reached the Learjet and observed that the windows were opaque, likely frosted over from extreme cold due to cabin depressurization. He noted no damage to the aircraft, but also no signs of life inside. Over the next hours, additional military jets took turns shadowing the aircraft, all confirming the same grim details. The engine still ran, but there was no movement in the cockpit, no acknowledgement, no change in course. The Learjet had lost cabin pressure shortly after takeoff. With no supplemental oxygen activated, those on board were likely unconscious within minutes from hypoxia, a silent and painless depletion of oxygen. For nearly 4 hours, the jet drifted on autopilot across 6 states and more than 1,500 miles. At 1:11 p.m., it began to descend uncontrollably. It entered a right-hand spiral before crashing into a field near Mena, South Dakota, killing all 6 on board instantly. The aftermath sent shockwaves through both aviation and the sporting world. Payne's memorial service was held on October 30th at the First Baptist Church of Orlando and attended by a vast gathering of athletes, friends, and fans. Fellow PGA Tour players honored him by wearing knickers during the final round of the Tour Championship. Stuart Appleby wore one of Payne's actual outfits with the blessing of Payne's widow, Tracy. In the years that followed, investigations confirmed that the crash was caused by a failure in the plane's pressurization system. Tracy Stewart and the families of the victims filed lawsuits against the aircraft's manufacturer, operator, and owner. The FBI launched a criminal investigation into Sunjet Aviation, seizing records and grounding the company's fleet. Though the investigation was later dropped, Sunjet was already bankrupt. In 2005, a jury found no fault with the manufacturer, but the legacy of Payne Stewart's tragic final flight remained, a reminder of the fragility of life, even for those soaring at the top of their game. December 2024 in Dallas, Texas. Just after 3 p.m., a black McLaren hypercar worth $400,000 sped down Abrams Road in the Lake Highlands neighborhood. This was right near Forest Meadow Middle School, and students had likely just been released for the day. Traffic was beginning to build. Witnesses said the engine was roaring, and the car was moving incredibly fast. Then, in an instant, everything changed. Inside the car were 2 men, 29-year-old Cristobal Flores Espino and 31-year-old Robert Leroy Rocha. They were driving through a neighborhood full of families and kids walking home from school. As they approached the intersection of Abrams Road and Royal Lane, something went wrong. The McLaren lost control, veered off the road, and slammed into a large tree. The impact was violent enough to split the vehicle in half. The front section wrapped around the tree. The rear section was thrown more than 30 feet down the road. Pieces of the car were scattered across the street and sidewalk. Cristobal and Robert didn't survive. Emergency responders from Dallas Fire Rescue arrived quickly, but both men were already gone. The damage was so severe that rescuers had to use heavy tools to reach the wreckage. This wasn't a normal accident. It was total destruction. Another vehicle, a gold Toyota sedan, was also involved. A woman was driving it. She crashed into a separate tree and was taken to the hospital with injuries that were not life-threatening. Her car's front end was severely damaged, but she survived. The crash was so loud that nearby residents rushed outside. Several called 911. Others recorded what they saw. Photos and videos later posted online showed just how extreme the impact had been. The McLaren was barely recognizable. The front half was crushed around the tree. The rear half sat alone on the road, almost intact, but completely separated. The vehicle was believed to be a McLaren 570S Coupe. It's known for its high performance, equipped with a 3.8-liter twin-turbo V8 engine. It can go from 0 to 62 miles per hour in 3.2 seconds, and its top speed exceeds 200 miles per hour. It's not made for city driving. It's a high-powered machine built for controlled environments. Police immediately shut down Abrams Road, especially the area near the school. Investigators arrived to measure skid marks, mark debris, and collect evidence. At first, the cause of the crash wasn't clear. Lieutenant Tremise Jones told reporters the next day that investigators were still looking into what caused the crash. They were reviewing every possible factor, including speed, distractions, and mechanical failure. There was no sign that police were chasing the car, and it hadn't been reported stolen. No substances had been confirmed at the time. The location of the crash added to the seriousness. This wasn't a highway. It was a school zone, where children walk home and crossing guards help families get across safely. Driving at high speed here wasn't just risky. It was dangerous for everyone nearby. Photos of the crash spread quickly online. People were shocked by what they saw. A car worth hundreds of thousands, torn apart like paper. The next day, candles and flowers appeared at the site. Locals came to pay their respects. Though Cristobal and Robert weren't public figures, their deaths deeply affected the neighborhood. The McLaren's carbon fiber frame is designed to handle extreme impacts. But even with that level of protection, the crash was too severe. The front was crushed beyond recognition. The rear section where the engine is was launched away but couldn't protect either occupant. No safety features could make a difference at that speed. In Dallas, the woman driving the Toyota was later released from the hospital. She began helping police with the investigation. Her account gave them a better idea of what happened just before the crash. The official cause still hasn't been confirmed. Investigators are reviewing all footage, vehicle data, and witness statements. They're trying to determine whether it was speed alone or if something else triggered the crash. This all took place just under 10 miles from downtown Dallas. A powerful car like the McLaren 570S wasn't meant for roads like this. And when that kind of power is used in a school zone, the outcome can be devastating. Cristobal and Robert lost their lives within seconds. A normal afternoon turned into a scene of destruction that no one could forget. Investigators are still searching for answers, and two families are left trying to understand how it all happened. August 19, 2024, off the coast of Porticello, a fishing village in northern Sicily. A 56-meter superyacht named Bayesian was anchored with 22 people on board, 12 guests and 10 crew. The trip was meant to celebrate tech billionaire Mike Lynch being cleared of serious legal trouble. Alongside him were his wife Angela and their 18-year-old daughter Hannah, who had recently finished school and was preparing to start university at Oxford. Lynch's close friends and longtime supporters were there too. Among them were Jonathan Bloomer, chairman of Morgan Stanley International, his wife Judy, and lawyer Chris Morvillo with his wife Nita. The group had gathered to unwind after a long and stressful period. By the evening of August 18th, the weather had begun to change. To stay safe, the yacht moved closer to Cefalù, hoping to avoid an incoming storm. The crew believed they had anchored in a secure area, but things quickly got worse. At midnight, winds were still mild, about 9 miles per hour. A deckhand was on watch. By 3 a.m., storm clouds were forming. At 3:55 a.m., wind speeds rose, and the deckhand captured a video of the approaching storm. He posted it online before securing parts of the yacht. Within minutes, wind speeds shot up to 35 miles per hour. The anchor dragged and the yacht began to tilt. At 4 a.m., the captain was woken up and the crew jumped into action. Chef Ricaldo Thomas was last seen securing kitchen items and speaking with others. By 4:06 a.m., the storm had become violent. Winds reached over 80 miles per hour. In just 15 seconds, the yacht tipped to a 90-degree angle. Crew and guests were thrown across the interior. A deckhand fell into the sea. Some people tried to escape their cabins while others climbed into the main saloon, using drawers as makeshift steps. Panic spread. Survivors moved to higher ground and the captain gave directions to stay away from dangerous equipment. At 4:22 a.m., emergency beacons were activated. A crew member helped keep a baby afloat with a seat cushion. Survivors clung to wreckage in the dark water. The crew released a life raft and people with injuries climbed in. Flares were used to signal for help. At 4:53 a.m., another vessel, the Sir Robert Baden-Powell, spotted the flares and rescued 15 people from the water. They were cold, bruised, and shaken, but alive. 7 others did not survive. Mike Lynch, his daughter Hannah, the Bloomers, the Morvillos, and Chef Ricaldo Thomas were all lost. Thomas's body was the first found, discovered near the wreck. He was remembered by friends from Antigua as kind and warm. The Bloomers and Morvillos were found still inside the yacht. Examination showed they likely ran out of air while trapped in small pockets inside the vessel. They didn't make it out before help arrived. Lynch's body was found inside the wreck. He had recently been cleared in a major legal case and had hoped this trip would mark a fresh start. Hannah's body was recovered last. She was only 18 and had been excited to start university. Her sister described her as joyful, thoughtful, and loving. Angela Lynch said the first tilt woke them up, followed by complete chaos. British passenger Charlotte Golunski, rescued along with her husband and baby, recalled holding her child above the water in total darkness for what felt like forever. The entire disaster unfolded in just 16 minutes. Investigators say a fast-moving mesocyclone caused the sudden storm. The yacht's keel wasn't lowered, and safety gaps in the manual may have left the crew unprepared for how quickly the vessel could lose stability. 3 crew members, including the captain, are under investigation but not charged. The yacht now rests 160 feet underwater. A Dutch diver died in an explosion during salvage efforts, and his death is under review. Experts hope the final recovery will reveal what went wrong and whether it was preventable. 7 lives were lost just miles from the shore. But when the storm hit, time simply ran out. It was September 2023 in Sardinia, Italy. A group of wealthy tourists was driving through the countryside near the small town of San Giovanni Suergiu. They were part of the Sardinia Supercar Experience, a luxury rally where participants drive Ferraris and Lamborghinis through scenic areas and stay in upscale resorts. Among the group was a red Ferrari Portofino carrying 67-year-old Marcus Krautley and his 63-year-old wife, Melissa. The couple were from Wallisellen near Zurich, Switzerland. Marcus was the head of a logistics company with offices in Switzerland, Belgium, and Portugal. Melissa worked in human resources at the same firm. The two loved traveling luxury and fast cars. This rally, which cost between £10,000 and £21,000 to join, was one of many adventures they had done together. Also in the group was a blue Lamborghini Huracan, driven by Indian billionaire Vikas Oberoi, the head of Oberoi Realty, a company that develops luxury properties and hotels in India. His net worth is estimated to be $3.6 billion. His wife, Gayatri Joshi, a Bollywood actress best known for her role in Swades, was in the passenger seat. On that day, the group was driving north from Fort Village to Morris along the 195 Sulsatana State Road, a narrow 2-lane route through rural Sardinia. What was supposed to be a smooth drive soon turned into a deadly accident. A German police officer on vacation captured dashcam footage that showed what happened. A white camper van was ahead of the supercars, slowing them down. Some of the convoy's drivers had already been seen ignoring traffic rules earlier that day. The narrow road left little room for safe overtaking, but the drivers seemed impatient. The video shows the Lamborghini attempting to pass the camper. At the same moment, Marcus in the Ferrari tried to pass both vehicles from behind. The Lamborghini swerved into the Ferrari's path. The two cars collided. The Lamborghini hit the camper van, flipping it onto its side and blocking both lanes. The Ferrari veered off the road, hit a grassy embankment, and burst into flames. Thick smoke rose into the air. The fire quickly spread, trapping Marcus and Melissa inside. Witnesses said they heard screaming. Emergency responders, including firefighters and an air ambulance, arrived quickly. But the fire had already destroyed the vehicle. Marcus and Melissa did not survive. Photos from the crash site show the Ferrari upside down and burned beyond recognition. The Lamborghini had landed at the bottom of a slope surrounded by dust and smoke. The camper van lay on its side across the road. Inside the van were a 61-year-old man named Lorenzo and his 62-year-old wife. They were tourists from northern Italy. After the crash, they found themselves sideways in their seats. The couple managed to crawl out and were later treated for non-life-threatening injuries. Vikas Oberoi and Gayatri Joshi were uninjured. Gayatri was seen sitting on the ground crying, while Vikas stood nearby in shock. Police began investigating immediately. All 3 vehicles, the Lamborghini, the Ferrari, and the camper van, were seized for examination. The dashcam footage given by the German officer became a key part of the case. It showed the Lamborghini crossing a solid white line, which in Italy means overtaking, is not allowed. Though Vikas Oberoi had not been formally charged, prosecutors placed him under investigation for what Italian law calls double-road homicide. If found responsible, he could face up to 7 years in prison. He was not barred from leaving Italy and returned to India shortly after the crash. Footage posted online later showed other rally drivers running red lights and ignoring traffic laws, suggesting that unsafe behavior was common during the event. The Sardinia Supercar Experience is marketed as a high-end driving tour. Participants either bring their own luxury cars or rent one. For Marcus and Melissa, what began as an exciting trip ended in tragedy. The crash destroyed 3 vehicles, took 2 lives, and left others traumatized. Investigators are still working to determine exactly who was responsible. August 30th, 2018, on the Greek island of Kefalonia, Sinead McNamara, a 20-year-old from Port Macquarie, Australia, was working as a crew member on a luxury yacht. She had spent the last 4 months aboard the Mayan Queen IV, a super yacht worth $190 million owned by Mexican mining billionaire Alberto Bayere. Through her Instagram, she documented her travels across Europe, sharing pictures of coastal towns and life aboard the yacht. Earlier that year, she had sold all her belongings to chase this lifestyle. And at the time, she was especially excited. Her mother and sister were flying to Greece to visit her. But that reunion never happened. On August 29th, the day before her death, Sinead made a distressed phone call to her family. She told them she had been in a serious argument with someone on board. She was crying. Later that night, she went out with some other crew members in Argostoli, the island's capital. Witnesses said she seemed happy, dancing and drinking with friends. There was no public sign that anything was wrong. But that emotional call stood out to her family. It was unlike her. The next morning, August 30th, something went terribly wrong. A passing boat saw something hanging from the back of the Mayan Queen IV. It was Sinead. She was unconscious but still alive, tangled in rope. Crew members quickly cut her down and called for help. She was airlifted to a hospital in Athens, but she died on the way. At the time of the incident, only the crew was on the yacht. Bayers had left 3 days earlier and later attended a public event in Mexico without making any comments. The case immediately attracted global attention. Investigators boarded the yacht and took its security footage, which reportedly captured Sinead's final moments. Greek authorities allowed the yacht to depart after conducting interviews and reviewing security footage. But the key video was reportedly never provided to the coroner for full examination. The official cause of death was ruled as hanging by coroner Ilias Bogiokas. But even he wasn't convinced that this was the full story. He noted that Sinead had no substances in her system, showed no signs of injury or a struggle, and had been mentally alert. Still, he said something felt off, possibly that someone had emotionally pressured her. Sinead's family pushed for answers. Their lawyers stated they believed she was emotionally stable and excited to see her family. They wanted to know who she argued with, what triggered that emotional phone call, and why it took so long for her to receive help. They were also concerned that the yacht wasn't fully searched and that important evidence, like the video footage, was withheld from investigators. The night before, she had been out celebrating, appearing cheerful, but she also called home clearly upset. The contrast between those moments added to the confusion. Did something happen between the time she left the bar and the moment she was found? Did she feel threatened? Investigators reviewed her phone, messages, and checked for signs of a struggle, but found no clear answers. The yacht's camera footage remains unreleased. And while officials leaned toward the idea that she may have taken her own life, her family and the coroner questioned whether she may have tried to resist. Sinead's sudden death shocked her followers and the yachting world. Friends and influencers posted tributes, remembering her as full of life. In her final Instagram post, she wrote about learning a Polish word, niebieski, meaning blue, during a jet ski ride. It had become her favorite word. But behind the images of adventure and beauty, something went terribly wrong, and the truth about Sinead McNamara's final hours remains locked away. Somewhere between a disturbing phone call, a luxury yacht, and an unanswered investigation. Sunday morning, October 2nd, 2022, in St. Petersburg, Florida. 3 teenagers, 15-year-old Mario Bonilla, 15-year-old Keandrick Lang, and 16-year-old Malachi Daniels, were walking through a quiet neighborhood. Most people were asleep, but the boys weren't just out for a stroll. They were checking cars to see if any had been left unlocked. Lang used his shirt to pull on door handles, trying not to leave fingerprints. They weren't after any specific car, just trying their luck. Then, at a driveway near 62nd Avenue North and 28th Street North, they found a white 2016 Maserati. It was unlocked, and the keys were inside. Lang got into the driver's seat, Bonilla sat up front, and Daniels climbed into the back. What they didn't know was that a sheriff's helicopter was flying overhead. It had been deployed for another case nearby, but happened to catch sight of the boys going from car to car. The deputies in the helicopter watched as the teens entered the Maserati and immediately called ground units to report a possible car theft. Lang pulled out of the driveway and turned onto 62nd Avenue North without turning on the headlights. It was just after 3:20 a.m. Deputies in marked cars activated their emergency lights to stop the vehicle. Lang hit the gas, believing he was being chased. But the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office follows a strict policy. No chasing vehicles unless certain conditions are met. A supervising sergeant told deputies to slow down, and they backed off to around 35 miles per hour. The helicopter kept following the Maserati. Lang sped up, fast. Just seconds before the crash, he was going 123 miles per hour. None of the boys were wearing seatbelts. Lang lost control of the car. It jumped a curb, slammed into a business sign, and flipped, landing upside down in a parking lot next to a building. The Maserati was destroyed, folded in half from the impact. Deputies arrived within seconds. Bonilla, in the front passenger seat, didn't survive. Daniels in the back was critically injured and rushed to the hospital. His condition was described as life-threatening. Lang was also taken to the hospital with serious injuries, but was expected to live. The entire event, from the theft to the crash, was recorded by the helicopter. The sheriff's office later released that footage during a press conference. The video showed Lang using his shirt to open the car door, the teens getting in, and the car speeding off with headlights still off. Just a minute and a half later, the crash occurred. Investigators found a .25 caliber handgun inside the wrecked car. It hadn't been legally registered since 1968 and was believed to have been passed around illegally. None of the teens had valid driver's licenses. While none had extensive criminal histories, they had been showing troubling behavior. Just a few weeks earlier, on September 11th, the same teens had been stopped by deputies in nearby Kenneth City for wandering around a neighborhood early in the morning. Officers contacted their parents, and the boys were taken home. No charges were filed. After the crash, investigators spoke to the families. The parents were heartbroken. One father had even moved his son to a different school, trying to change his path. But that night, all three had left home without anyone noticing. Sheriff Bob Gualtieri said the teens had been making poor decisions, though they hadn't yet faced real consequences, until now. The car's owner, who had left the Maserati unlocked with the keys inside, was contacted. At a press conference, the sheriff stressed the importance of locking vehicles and not leaving keys inside. One choice changed everything. One teen died. Another may never recover. The third survived, but now faces serious legal consequences, all because of an unlocked car. It was early 2024 in Sydney, Australia. Lixin Wang, a 60-year-old millionaire, had agreed to spend the night on a yacht with her on-and-off partner, 56-year-old Peter Ray. The yacht, named Taloha, was a 47-foot luxury boat docked off Camaray in Sydney's lower North Shore. It was worth around $250,000 and had been Peter's passion project for over a year. Peter was a plumber who loved sailing. For the past 18 months, he had been restoring Taloha with plans to race it in Airlie Beach Race Week in Queensland. He was also planning a major life change. According to his ex-wife Andrea, Peter, who shared 3 adult children with her, was ready to start over. Despite their separation, she said he remained a dedicated father. Lixin Wang had a very different background. She had owned several adult businesses in Sydney, including the Flamingo Club and Xanadu Heaven in Bondi. Her businesses made her wealthy, but also came with controversy. Several former employees accused her of mistreatment, saying she pressured staff to work without pay. One former worker also claimed Wang hid key details from clients about staff identities. The Flamingo Club had previously been owned by Luke Nesbitt, who was later jailed for over 3 years after being caught with nearly 500 grams of a banned substance. After his arrest, Wang reportedly took over the club. Besides running these venues, Wang also owned a massage business under her name. She sold the property it operated from for over $16 million just months before it shut down. The home had 5 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, and overlooked the water. She had bought it 10 years earlier for just under $10 million. It's believed Wang owned several other properties throughout Sydney. Even with her financial success, her business practices often came under question. When the Flamingo Club closed, some former employees said she still owed them large amounts of money. On a Monday, Wang and Ray arrived at the marina separately and boarded Taloha for what was expected to be a peaceful getaway. But by Wednesday night, both had gone silent. No one had heard from them in 2 days. Worried, a friend of Ray's contacted emergency services. Around 9 p.m., police arrived at the boat, which was anchored near Tunks Park. A strong smell inside led them to call in firefighters wearing breathing gear in case of a gas leak. Inside the main cabin, authorities found both Wang and Ray lying side by side, unresponsive. There were no visible injuries, no blood, and no weapons. The scene was treated as suspicious. Investigators found illegal substances and other troubling items on board, triggering a full forensic review. Gas cylinders were removed from the boat, and officials began looking into possible carbon monoxide poisoning. Experts said a boat with a closed cabin and faulty gas system could easily fill with harmful gas, especially during cold weather, without anyone realizing. A boating expert explained that vessels like Taloha require a gas safety check every 10 years. If the system had failed and the cabin had been shut, it could have created a dangerous situation. People nearby reported hearing the generator running for nearly 2 full days, but no one saw anyone coming or going from the boat. Both Ray's and Wang's cars were still parked at the marina, suggesting they never left the yacht. Investigators believe their deaths happened sometime between Monday night and early Wednesday. Police called the case suspicious, not due to signs of foul play, but because the cause of death wasn't clear. Authorities are now waiting for toxicology and post-mortem results to understand what really happened. Adding to the mystery was a strange connection from Wang's past. Months before a tragic incident at a Bondi mall, the person involved had tried to apply for a job at the Flamingo Club. The manager rejected the application, finding it unusual. Although Wang wasn't directly involved, it was another strange link to her business. Ray had simply been focused on finishing Taloha and starting a new chapter. But what should have been a fresh beginning ended with questions no one can yet answer. For now, the deaths of Lixin Wang and Peter Ray remain unsolved. It was the early morning of March 18, 2012 in Beijing, China. The streets were mostly quiet, but on the North 4th Ring Road, a major highway, a crash occurred that would spark major controversy. A black Ferrari 458 Spider was speeding down the road. Inside were 3 young people. The driver, 23-year-old Ling Gu, was the only son of Ling Jihua, one of the most powerful officials in China and a close aide to then-President Hu Jintao. With him were 2 women, reportedly either partially or not clothed. Some speculated they were engaged in intimate activity when Ling lost control. The Ferrari hit a wall at high speed near Baofuzi Bridge. Ling Gu died at the scene. One of the women also passed away, while the other survived with life-changing injuries, becoming paralyzed from the neck down. First responders had trouble identifying the victims due to the crash's severity, but it quickly became clear this was no ordinary accident. Soon after, a photo of the wrecked Ferrari was published in the Beijing Evening News and began circulating online. Users on Chinese social media started asking who the driver was and how such a high-end car ended up in such a crash. But not long after those posts appeared, they started disappearing. Government censors began removing any mention of the crash. Searches for terms like Ferrari, Little Ling, or Prince Ling came up empty. Behind the scenes, officials were trying to hide what had happened. Ling Gu's name was changed on official documents, possibly using the surname Jia, which sounds like fake in Mandarin. This caused more confusion since Jia was also the surname of another senior official who was reportedly upset by the rumors. Ling Jihua, the father, was allegedly shown the body but denied it was his son. Reports claimed he tried to use his influence over state security to manage the situation. One source said he contacted Zhou Yongkang, head of China's legal and political affairs, asking for help in covering up the incident. Although the government stayed quiet, political circles in Beijing knew what had happened. Ling Gu had crashed a $500,000 Ferrari while accompanied by two women. The public began asking how someone from a modestly paid government family could afford such a car. The timing couldn't have been worse. China was just weeks away from a major leadership shift. President Hu was stepping down and Xi Jinping was preparing to take over. Ling Jihua had been expected to rise into the Politburo, China's top decision-making group. But 5 months after the crash, in August 2012, he was quietly removed from his powerful role and reassigned. His new job, while still important, was clearly a step down. Hong Kong's South China Morning Post was the first to break the silence, confirming Ling Gu's death. Global media soon picked up the story. Though some foreign outlets reported unconfirmed and sensitive details about the crash, Chinese media remained silent. The story triggered outrage online. Many saw it as another example of the privileged lifestyles enjoyed by the children of high-ranking officials. Despite their parents earning modest official salaries, around $8,000 a year, these young adults were often seen in luxury cars and expensive clothing. Reports surfaced that the families of the two women were offered money to stay quiet. One claim said the funds came from an oil company executive with political ties. Efforts were also made online to discredit the story using fake accounts. But by then, it was too late to control. Back in China, the crash was never officially acknowledged. But people continued to talk about it, quietly. Ling Gu's classmates were shocked. One roommate said they had planned to attend graduate school together, but after the crash, he never saw him again. There were no public statements, no national mourning, just silence. Still, the black Ferrari crash remains one of the most talked about cases in recent Chinese political history, an event where power, secrecy, and privilege all collided. 30th, 2025, deep in the remote wilderness of northern Namibia. Bernd Kebbel, a 59-year-old German-born businessman and conservation supporter, was on a safari in the Kunene region. He wasn't just visiting. Bernd had spent years helping protect Namibia's desert-adapted lions. He donated large amounts of money to conservation projects and even helped provide vehicles for researchers working in the area. He was joined by his wife, 57-year-old Connie Kebbel, and a group of close friends, including 6 children. They traveled in 3 four-wheel drive vehicles with rooftop tents, typical for desert camping. They had stopped near the Honib Skeleton Coast Camp, one of the few places where desert lions still survive. That night, the desert was silent and pitch dark. Everyone settled into their rooftop tents, believing they were safe above the ground. Bernd and Connie were sleeping in a tent mounted on their vehicle. Around 1:30 a.m., Bernd climbed down from the tent to use the toilet. It was a short, routine trip, one many safari-goers make. But nearby, a lioness named Charlie was waiting. Charlie wasn't a typical lion. She was 12 years old and severely underweight. Photos taken weeks earlier showed her ribs clearly. She was once one of the young lions featured in a well-known documentary, but now she was starving and had lost her fear of humans. As Bernd reached the ground, Charlie attacked. She bit into his neck and dragged him into the bushes. The attack was fast and brutal. Bernd didn't survive. Connie woke to strange sounds, then heard her husband's voice and the lion's growl. When she looked outside, she saw the lioness had taken Bernd. Without hesitation, she climbed down, grabbed a metal pole from the vehicle, and ran toward Charlie. She began hitting the lioness repeatedly while screaming. At one point, she even grabbed Charlie's leather tracking collar and tried to pull it off. A second camper arrived and struck the lioness with a torch. Finally, Charlie backed off and disappeared into the darkness, but it was already too late. Bernd had died almost instantly from his injuries. The group stayed close together, trying to process what had just happened, but the danger hadn't passed. Charlie returned, circling the camp and pretending to charge from different directions. The group was forced to stay inside their vehicles for safety. The next night, Charlie approached another nearby camp. She tore into a tent, biting and clawing at it. Footage later showed the damage. She had become too dangerous. Namibia's Ministry of Environment and Tourism launched an investigation. They concluded Charlie had lost her fear of people. On June 1st, just 2 days later, officials found her resting under a bush and ended her life. Connie later spoke publicly and shared that they had come to terms with what had happened. She expressed that they never wanted Charlie to die and that the incident occurred in a place both she and Bernd had cherished. Locals were stunned by Connie's bravery. Some even described her actions as heroic. A local tour guide who knew the couple well remarked that few people could face a lioness and survive, but Connie did. Experts say only around 60 desert-adapted lions remain in the Kunene region and about 800 across all of Namibia. They live in harsh environments and rely on prey for hydration. But as human development spreads, lions face shrinking territory and increasing conflict. Bernd had spent years trying to protect them. He supported the Desert Lion Project and helped researchers like Dr. Philip Flip Stander. One male lion was even named Kebbel after him, though it was later put down due to safety concerns. Bernd also owned the Off-Road Center in Windhoek, a company that supplied safari gear. His children, Dieter and Heidi, who lived in South Africa, returned to Namibia to be with their mother after the tragedy. Police confirmed Bernd's death, noting that campers tried to help, but the attack was too sudden. The ministry also confirmed the incident and continued their investigation. Both conservationists and wildlife experts mourned the loss of Bernd and Charlie. One expert summed it up: the loss of a person, a lioness, and a part of Namibia's wilderness left a deep impact. 31st, 2024 in northern Italy. Around midday, a white Ferrari GTC4 was speeding down the A4 to A5 highway between Ivrea and Sant'Anna. Inside the car were 40-year-old DJ Hisny Kestad, also known as DJ Style Q, and 21-year-old Ukrainian model Anna Kravska. Earlier that day, they had left a nightclub in Sion, Switzerland, where Kestad had performed. What began as a high-speed drive ended in one of the most serious road accidents Italy had seen that year. Anna, originally from Odessa, Ukraine, had built a modeling career and lived in Switzerland. She was active on social media, often posting about her trips and daily life. But just before the crash, she went silent. Her friends grew worried when they didn't hear from her after she told them she was heading to Italy. Kestad was well known in the European nightlife scene. He had performed in several countries, including Albania, Germany, Switzerland, and the United States. Though he lived in Villeneuve, Switzerland, his wife and two children, ages 11 and 14, still lived in Kosovo. The night before the crash, he performed at the Jukebox Club in Sion. Witnesses saw him leave the venue with Anna. At around 1:00 p.m. on Easter Sunday, the Ferrari was reportedly traveling at around 200 kilometers per hour, about 124 miles per hour, when Kestad lost control. Near the town of Alice Castello, the car slammed into a guardrail. The impact was so severe that the Ferrari split in half. The front of the car, where both passengers were seated, was destroyed and quickly caught fire. One of the front wheels was thrown several yards away. Only the rear of the car remained mostly intact. Witnesses said the car had been moving at extreme speed right before the crash. Emergency services arrived quickly, police, paramedics, and firefighters, but it was too late. Both Kestad and Anna died instantly. The fire made it very hard to identify the bodies. Authorities first confirmed the identity of the driver, Kestad. His body was found near the driver's seat, and a gold watch that had survived the fire helped confirm who he was. The second victim, a young woman in the passenger seat, couldn't be identified visually due to the fire damage. But Swiss police had just received a missing persons report from Anna's friends. The timing matched. She had told them she was going to Italy but never contacted them again. Witnesses at the club confirmed she had left with Kestad. Investigators launched DNA testing, and a second gold watch, one seen often in Anna's social media posts, was found at the scene. Her friends were certain it belonged to her. The Ferrari they were in was a high-powered luxury car worth more than $135,000. At extreme speeds, even a small mistake can be fatal. Investigators found no mechanical issues or road hazards. The cause appeared to be speed alone. Photos from the scene show the extent of the damage. The front of the car was nearly gone, burned down to metal. Only the rear remained, offering a clue to the type of car involved. This case drew attention due to who the victims were. Anna and Kestad were both active online and had large followings. Though they never confirmed a relationship, those close to them said they had been spending time together more often. Kestad's brother, Agimi, described him as a kind and caring person, a loving father and devoted sibling. His two children were left without their father. Anna's friends were heartbroken. She had rebuilt her life in Switzerland and was doing well. The sudden loss hit them hard. Investigators shut down the highway for hours as cleanup crews removed the debris. Parts of the car had scattered across the road and nearby fields. Every piece was documented to understand how the crash happened. No foul play or outside factors were found. This was a case of speed, a moment of lost control, and a car that couldn't recover. There was no warning, no way out. Just an instant crash that ended 2 lives. It was July 25th, 2017. The Emerald Princess, a luxury cruise ship, was sailing through the calm waters of Alaska. On board were Kenneth and Christy Manzanares, along with their 3 daughters and extended family. They had just left Seattle to celebrate the couple's 18th wedding anniversary. From the outside, everything looked peaceful, but inside cabin D-726, something terrible was happening. Christy, 39, was a caring mother, described by friends and family as kind and full of life. This trip was meant to be a special time together. But on the second night, things took a dark turn. That evening, Kenneth and Christy were in the cabin with 2 of their daughters. Tension had been building, and Christy confronted Kenneth about his behavior. She told him she wanted a divorce, and that he should get off the ship at the next stop in Juneau and go back home to Utah. Court documents say that's when things spiraled. Kenneth told the girls to go to the next cabin with family. Moments later, they heard their mother scream. They ran to the door, but Kenneth blocked them. The girls rushed to the shared balcony and looked through the glass. They saw Kenneth on top of Christy, hitting her repeatedly. She tried to fight back, but he didn't stop. He paused when he saw blood, then hit her again. Christy's brother arrived soon after and stopped Kenneth from dragging her toward the balcony. Kenneth had reportedly tried to throw her overboard. Her brother pulled her back into the room. Security and medical staff were called. They tried to save Christy, but it was too late. She was pronounced dead soon after. The cause of death was blunt force trauma to her head and face. The scene was described in court records as extremely disturbing. Kenneth was covered in blood and was arrested the next day when the ship docked. He remained in custody from then on. The most painful part was that 2 of their daughters witnessed it. Though not in the room during the attack, they saw what followed. One passenger remembered a girl running down the hallway, screaming for help after seeing her parents fight. Kenneth first pleaded not guilty, but later admitted guilt in a plea deal. He claimed Christy had laughed at him and wouldn't stop, which made him snap. He said he didn't remember what happened after seeing the blood. The event shocked everyone on board. Some even thought it was part of that night's planned mystery play. But it wasn't a show, it was real. During court hearings, Kenneth's lawyers asked for a lighter sentence. They said he had brain issues from years of contact sports, untreated bipolar disorder, and had mixed medications with alcohol. They argued that this mix caused an episode of uncharacteristic behavior. But prosecutors pointed to past incidents of anger, including times when he had damaged property or restrained Christy. Judge Timothy Burgess reviewed the case and found the defense's arguments weak. He described the act as violent and tragic, especially because it happened in front of their children. Kenneth was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison, plus 5 years of supervised release with no chance of parole. Months later, Kenneth was found unresponsive in his jail cell in Juneau. Emergency teams tried to revive him, but he was pronounced dead. He was 43 years old. No foul play was suspected, and the cause of death wasn't made public. At the time, he had not yet been transferred to a federal prison. The Emerald Princess continued its voyages. Cabin D-726 was cleaned and used again. But for Christy's family, especially her daughters, life would never be the same. They lost both parents that night, one to death and the other to a courtroom and a jail cell. And the memories of what they saw on that cruise will stay with them forever. June 22, 2019, in Glengarry, a quiet suburb in Adelaide, South Australia. 15-year-old Sophia Naismith was walking with her best friend Jordan Kalia along Morfitt Road. It was a regular evening, but just before 10 p.m. things took a tragic turn. Sophia was a student at Brighton Secondary School. She was known for her kindness, drive, and school spirit. She played volleyball and had been chosen to represent South Australia in a national tournament set for August. Her parents, Pia Vogren and Luke Naismith, were proud of all she had accomplished. That night, as Sophia and Jordan passed the House of Tea and Chinese restaurant, a white Lamborghini Huracan suddenly veered off the road, jumped the curb and struck them before crashing into the building. The car was driven by 37-year-old Alexander Campbell. He had owned the Lamborghini, valued at $330,000 for just 4 months. It had custom plates that read "Psycho." On this night, he was driving in sports mode, a setting that increases the vehicle's power and disables key safety systems, including electronic stability control. Sophia died at the scene. Jordan was seriously injured and taken to Flinders Medical Center. From her hospital bed, she posted a tribute to Sophia on Instagram, writing, "You will be forever loved and never forgotten." The tragedy shook the community. Flowers and messages were left at the site. Around 2,000 people later attended a public memorial for Sophia. Her school described her as a popular and vibrant student. Support was offered to students and staff as the city mourned. Authorities launched an investigation. Prosecutors said Campbell knew what disabling the safety systems meant, especially in such a powerful car on a cold road. They believed he had already lost control of the car earlier that same drive. Campbell was charged with causing death by dangerous driving. But 3 years later, during a judge-alone trial, he was found not guilty of that charge. The court said it wasn't proven beyond a reasonable doubt that he had accelerated dangerously. Instead, he pleaded guilty to a lesser charge, aggravated driving without due care. During sentencing, the court confirmed that Campbell had knowingly disabled the car's safety systems and used a mode that made it harder to control. The judge, Paul Muscat, said this was more than just a brief mistake. It showed serious carelessness. Still, Campbell did not receive prison time. In February 2021, he was given a suspended sentence of 4 months and 27 days due to his early guilty plea. He was also ordered to do community service and placed on an 18-month good behavior bond. His driving license was suspended for 4 years and 4 months, though some of that time had already passed while he was on bail. Outside court, Sophia's mother called the sentence sickening. Her father said they would focus on pushing for changes in the law, and they succeeded. In the following years, new laws were introduced in South Australia under the name Sophia's Law. These included fines up to $5,000 for disabling safety features in powerful vehicles. A new offense was created for causing harm or death through careless driving, which can lead to up to 7 years in prison. Police were also given more authority to suspend licenses on the spot, and soon, drivers will need a special license to operate ultra-high-powered vehicles. Volleyball SA also honored Sophia by launching the Sophia Naismith SA Spirit Award in 2023. It celebrates young athletes who show compassion, teamwork, and dedication, all values Sophia was known for. The first recipient was Zephyr Bruce, who continued to support her teammates even after being injured. Sophia's parents personally handed her the award. Sophia's life was cut short during a walk with her best friend. A man in a powerful car made dangerous choices, and the justice system couldn't fully hold him responsible. But her family's fight for change has helped reshape the law, ensuring her legacy lives on. On March 3, 2023, a private jet bound for Washington, D.C. diverted course and made an emergency landing in Connecticut. Out of the 5 individuals on board, only 4 would survive the turbulent flight. What began as a routine flight ended in an irreversible tragedy that would leave a lasting mark on family, colleagues, and the aviation community. 55-year-old Dana Hyde had spent her career at the highest levels of public service and policy. She had served in both the Obama and Clinton administrations and was part of the 9/11 Commission, formerly known as the National Commission on Terrorist Attacks upon the United States. In March 2023, she was a part-time consultant for the Aspen Institute, where she co-chaired the Partnership for an Inclusive Economy, a role that reflected her dedication to creating more equitable systems. Dana lived in Cabin John, Maryland, with her husband, Jonathan Chambers, and their 2 sons. Jonathan was a partner at Conexon LLC, a rural broadband company based in Kansas City, Missouri. The private Bombardier Challenger 300 jet that they boarded that day belonged to Conexon. The aircraft took off from Keene, New Hampshire, headed toward Leesburg, Virginia, but encountered technical difficulties shortly after departure. The incident began with several cockpit alerts, prompting the pilots to follow an emergency checklist. They switched off a key system known as the stabilizer trim, which adjusts the tailplane to keep the aircraft level. Although this step aligned with safety protocols, it triggered a catastrophic response. The plane's nose pitched upward violently, subjecting the passengers to forces around 4 times the normal pull of gravity. Seconds later, the aircraft dove and then climbed again in a pattern of uncontrolled motion that left those inside helpless. Amid this terrifying instability, Dana suffered fatal blunt force injuries. She was the only person harmed. Her husband, son, and the 2 pilots were physically unscathed. The aircraft, unable to maintain steady flight, was redirected to Bradley International Airport in Connecticut. The emergency landing was completed within about 17 minutes of takeoff. Emergency responders met the jet, and Dana was immediately transported by ambulance to St. Francis Medical Center in Hartford. Despite efforts to save her, she was pronounced dead that evening. Dana died of major blunt injuries to her neck, head, body, and extremities. Initial confusion surrounded the cause of the incident, with early reports suggesting turbulence. However, the National Transportation Safety Board quickly clarified that turbulence had not played a role. Instead, the tragedy stemmed from mechanical and procedural failures linked to the aircraft's trim system. In its preliminary findings, the NTSB detailed a troubling series of oversights. Before takeoff, one of the jet's 2 airspeed indicators had failed during an aborted takeoff, likely due to a probe cover not being removed. Although the pilots attempted to resolve the issue, they decided to proceed with the flight despite an advisory message remaining active. Once airborne, additional caution messages appeared. The pilot in command opted to continue climbing and enabled the autopilot while attempting to troubleshoot the warnings, a decision that increased the severity of what was to follow. When the autopilot was disengaged, the jet pitched sharply upward, resulting in the violent sequence that led to Dana's death. The flight crew consisted of 2 experienced pilots with thousands of hours of flying time between them, though both had only recently earned their certification to fly the Challenger 300. The Federal Aviation Administration had previously issued safety directives concerning this model's stabilizer trim system, following reports of similar control problems. Bombardier, the Canadian manufacturer of the aircraft, issued a statement expressing that it was studying the incident while reaffirming its confidence in the jet's airworthiness. As the investigation continued, the jet's cockpit voice and data recorders were sent to NTSB headquarters for further analysis. The FBI also became involved in the inquiry, though no criminal activity was suspected. Officials have not stated whether Dana was seated with a seatbelt at the time of the incident. In the wake of her death, tributes poured in from former colleagues and institutions. The Aspen Institute described Dana as a brilliant and generous leader, someone who worked to create partnerships that would bring about lasting positive change. Her legacy, shaped by decades of public service and policy work, now also carries the weight of a cautionary tale, one that underscores the critical importance of procedural adherence, aircraft design integrity, and the unforgiving consequences of airborne error. It was December 15, 2017 in Toronto, Canada. A realtor was giving a midday tour of a mansion worth $5.5 million in one of the city's most exclusive neighborhoods. The home belonged to Barry and Honey Sherman, one of the wealthiest couples in the country. But what the realtor found in the basement changed everything. Barry and Honey were seated upright beside their indoor pool. Belts had been wrapped around their necks and tied to a metal railing. They were fully clothed. Honey had some facial bruising. Barry had no injuries at all. Nothing in the house was out of place, no signs of forced entry, no weapons, nothing stolen. The police were unsure how to classify what they saw. At first, they simply called it suspicious. 6 weeks later, in January 2018, police changed course. After reviewing the evidence, they ruled it a double homicide. Both had died from what they called ligature neck compression. They were restrained and suffocated using a strap or cord. Barry Sherman wasn't just rich. He founded Apotex, a generic drug company worth billions. Forbes had estimated his net worth at over $3 billion. He had donated more than $50 million to charity and had strong ties in both business and politics. Honey Sherman was also well known for her charity work and kind personality. But Barry's life wasn't simple. He had been involved in several lawsuits, including a major one brought by his cousin Kerry Winter. Kerry once saw Barry as a father figure, but things turned bitter. He and his siblings sued Barry for $1 billion, claiming Barry had taken over the family business unfairly. The case was dismissed just months before the Shermans were found dead. Kerry had a history of drug use and admitted to disliking Barry. In fact, in 2018, He told reporters that police should have looked at him as a possible suspect. He also presented a theory that shocked many. He believed Barry had ended Honey's life, then took his own. Carey claimed Barry was overwhelmed. He had business issues, his company was under pressure, he was isolated from family, and Carey believed he showed early signs of memory problems. According to Carey, Barry and Honey got into an argument, possibly over a new house she wanted. He believed Barry lashed out, then staged the scene to hide what happened. He pointed out that Barry had no signs of injury, while Honey had bruising. To him, that was suspicious. But Barry and Honey's 4 children, Jonathan, Lauren, Alexandra, and Kaylin, strongly denied Carey's theory. They hired private investigators, ordered a second autopsy, and fully believed someone else was responsible. That second autopsy revealed something new, marks on the Shermans' wrists, which the first report had missed. This suggested they may have been restrained, supporting the idea of foul play. Toronto police agreed and continued investigating the case as a double homicide. Barry and Honey were last seen alive on December 13th. After that, there was silence. 2 days later, the realtor found their bodies. There were no signs of forced entry, no indoor cameras. The key lockbox may have been accessed. Someone might have entered who the Shermans trusted. Police later released footage showing a person walking near the home on the night of December 13th. Their walk was strange. They kicked up their right heel. This person was never identified but was labeled a suspect. Despite public appeals and a reward of $35 million, the largest in Canadian history, no one has been charged. Police searched multiple homes and gathered digital records from Barry's work. He had ongoing legal disputes, including one involving $150,000. He also lent money to many people. The list of possible motives was long. Their funeral was attended by thousands, including Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Jonathan Sherman spoke, saying his parents were loving people who didn't choose this. They were taken from us, he said. Years later, the family still demands answers. Alex Krushik, their daughter, said the loss left her family broken. Jonathan later told the CBC that every day since their deaths has been a nightmare. He even increased the reward money. Today, the home has been demolished. But the questions remain. No arrests have been made. And 8 years later, the truth about what happened inside that house is still unknown. In the early hours of May 23rd, Daniel Williams, a 39-year-old musician once known for his thunderous drumming with the Christian metalcore band The Devil Wears Prada, was aboard a private plane on a cross-country trip. But only miles from its destination, the flight took a devastating turn, leaving behind a scorched neighborhood, a grieving music community, and loved ones struggling to process a loss that came far too soon. Daniel was no stranger to survival. Originally from Dayton, Ohio, he had endured a horrifying mass shooting in 2019 that left 9 dead and dozens wounded outside Ned Pepper's bar. He had been inside the venue when gunfire erupted. "I have never been so scared in my life," he later wrote. He survived that night with his life and perspective intact, later speaking out about gun control. That near-death experience didn't break him. Instead, it gave him more reason to live with intention. After leaving The Devil Wears Prada in 2016, Daniel pivoted to software engineering but remained deeply connected to music. He found happiness in San Diego, building a life with his fiancée, Hannah Ray, who described him as the most supportive and positive soul she had ever known. Late on the night of May 22nd, Daniel boarded a private jet at Teterboro Airport in New Jersey, alongside music manager and pilot Dave Shapiro and 4 others, including 3 industry professionals. Daniel documented the journey on Instagram, posting photos from inside the cockpit and jokingly referring to himself as the co-pilot. One of his final posts was filled with eerie enthusiasm. "Here we go!" The 8-seater Cessna 550 Citation had a clear route. Take off from New Jersey, refuel in Wichita, Kansas, and land in San Diego. But it never made it. At 3:45 a.m., just 2 miles from its intended landing at Montgomery Gibbs Executive Airport, the jet clipped power lines in heavy fog. The aircraft plummeted into the Murphy Canyon neighborhood, erupting into a fireball that tore through homes, ignited vehicles, and rained jet fuel across the street. Doorbell cameras captured the moment of impact, the sky exploding into flames and the street consumed by chaos. All 6 passengers, including Daniel and Dave, were killed instantly. Miraculously, no one on the ground died, but the neighborhood bore the brunt of the devastation. 10 homes were damaged, and 8 residents were injured while fleeing. including a family of 5 hospitalized for smoke inhalation. Daniel's death sent shockwaves through the music community. His former band shared a brief but devastating tribute. "No words, we owe you everything, love you forever." Industry figures expressed their grief publicly, mourning not only Daniel but Dave Shapiro as well, an influential agent, producer, and founder of Sound Talent Group and Velocity Records. Dave had recently purchased the jet and was a licensed pilot, though it remains unclear who was at the controls at the time of the crash. The National Independent Talent Organization also paid tribute to Shapiro, calling him a visionary who had shaped the careers of countless musicians and helped the industry navigate the pandemic's shutdowns. For Hannah, the tragedy was deeply personal in more ways than one. Daniel died on what would have been the 14th anniversary of their relationship's beginning. In her words, their story started on May 22, 2011, a date now marked by both love and loss. She shared photos of their life together, clinging to memories that now take the place of a future they will never share. The crash is under investigation by the National Transportation Safety Board and the FAA. Investigators are combing through wreckage, flight records, and audio communications. Weather conditions, particularly the thick fog, are believed to have played a role. Audio from the cockpit recorded shortly before the crash indicated the aircraft was just 3 miles out and on final approach. Daniel Williams leaves behind more than a musical legacy. He leaves behind a life that survived violence, embraced change, and was marked by resilience. It was July 3, 2018, in Beaulieu, a quiet village in southern France known for its scenic views and stone buildings. That morning, a group of Chinese tourists arrived in town. Among them was 57-year-old Wang Jian, the co-founder and chairman of HNA Group, one of China's biggest business empires. Wang was there on a short sightseeing break during a business trip. Wang wasn't a public figure to most people, but in the business world he was highly respected. Alongside Chen Feng, Wang built HNA from a small regional airline into a global powerhouse. The company owned assets across the world, including Hilton Hotels and shares in Deutsche Bank. It had over 400,000 employees and was valued at $230 billion. Wang held a 15% stake in the company and had a personal fortune estimated at $1.7 billion. While Chen was the public face, Wang handled most of the internal operations. Wang had a background in aviation and business. He studied airline management in China and later earned an MBA in the Netherlands. He spent years working behind the scenes and was known as a quiet and focused leader. That morning, Wang and his travel companions stopped near the village's upper church to admire the view over the cedrus forest. There was a stone wall at the edge, often used by tourists for photos. Wang climbed onto the wall, asking someone to take his picture. Moments later, he lost his balance and fell. Witnesses said he may have moved too quickly or simply slipped. The drop was about 49 feet. Emergency responders arrived fast, but Wang had suffered severe injuries and was pronounced dead at the scene. Police investigated and concluded it was a tragic accident. Lieutenant Colonel Hubert Marriott, who led the inquiry, confirmed there were no signs of anything suspicious. While some early media reports hinted at other possibilities, there was no evidence suggesting anything other than a fall. An autopsy was done as part of normal procedure, and no further concerns were raised. News of Wang's death spread quickly in China. On social media, his name started trending, but within hours the topic disappeared from the trending list. Some users noticed that posts discussing Wang's death were being taken down, adding to public confusion. Many started to wonder why discussion around the incident was being limited. At HNA headquarters, the website was changed to a gray theme as a sign of mourning. A statement was released praising Wang as a visionary leader, but behind the tribute were deeper concerns. HNA had been under pressure. The company had spent years buying foreign assets using borrowed money. By the end of 2017, its debt had reached around $95 billion. Chinese regulators had begun pushing companies like HNA to cut back on risky spending. In response, HNA started selling off assets, shares in Hilton, Deutsche Bank, and other firms. Wang's passing came during this critical time. A deal to buy a large Australian logistics company had just collapsed due to money issues. In New Zealand, regulators had recently blocked another planned acquisition over financial concerns. Just weeks before the fall, Wang reportedly sent an internal email claiming the company was being targeted by unknown forces working against China. The message was vague and was never followed up publicly. After Wang's death, investors quickly reacted. HNA's bond prices fell sharply, and fears grew over the company's future. It was already seen as a major financial risk, what some in China called a gray rhino, a big problem that's easy to see but often ignored until it's too late. Wang's family soon arrived in France. His widow and brother, Wang Wei, were deeply affected. Wang wasn't just a businessman, he was a husband and a brother. His passing left both a personal void and a major gap in the company's leadership. Wang had promised that if anything happened to him, his stake in HNA would go to a New York-based charity linked to the company. But due to HNA's unclear ownership structure, it wasn't certain if that would happen. Although the fall was ruled accidental, the timing and secrecy surrounding the event left many people with questions. Wang Jian had worked behind the scenes his entire career, but in the end, it was his sudden and tragic death that brought him to global attention. He was 57 years old. On October 21, 2022, the Caribbean Sea became the final silent witness to a devastating loss. A private aircraft, sleek and built for luxury, disappeared without warning off the coast of Costa Rica. On board were 6 people, among them one of Germany's most prominent entrepreneurs, Rainer Schaller, a man whose name had long been tied to innovation, success, and controversy. His final journey would become a somber chapter in aviation tragedy. Rainer Schaller, born on January 4, 1969, was best known as the founder and CEO of RSG Group, a global fitness empire encompassing brands such as McFit, John Reed, and Gold's Gym. With operations in 48 countries and over 41,000 employees, he had built a vast network in the fitness and lifestyle industry. Yet his legacy extended beyond business. In 2010, Schaller had been thrust into the international spotlight as the organizer of the Love Parade in Duisburg, where a catastrophic crowd crush claimed 21 lives. Although his security plan had been approved by city officials, the tragedy left a lasting mark on his public image. On that October day in 2022, Rainer boarded a Piaggio P180 Avanti, a twin-engine Italian-made turboprop departing from Palenque, Mexico, with a final destination of Limon, Costa Rica. Accompanying him were his partner, Christian Sikorsky, 44, their children Aaron and Finja, his personal trainer Marcus Kurek, 40, and a 66-year-old Swiss pilot. The plane, known for its distinctive design and used frequently for executive travel, had been part of Schaller's fleet since 2019. At approximately 6 p.m., the aircraft began its descent toward Lyman Airport. It was flying at around 275 miles per hour, and alarmingly, at an altitude of just 230 feet above sea level when it lost contact with air traffic control. The disappearance occurred near the area of Barra de Parismina, a remote stretch along the Caribbean coastline. Within moments, radar contact vanished, and with it all certainty about the plane's fate. Costa Rican authorities were alerted almost immediately. The Ministry of Public Security confirmed that a flight from Mexico to Limon with 5 German passengers had failed to arrive. A large-scale search began early the next morning, with the Coast Guard and Red Cross coordinating efforts. Debris from the aircraft was discovered about 28 kilometers offshore. Twisted pieces of fuselage, personal belongings such as backpacks and makeup bags, and 2 bodies, one adult and one child. These grim findings confirmed the fears that had rapidly spread across news networks and social media. Though the victims' identities were initially withheld, it was later confirmed that the bodies recovered belonged to Rainer and his young son Aaron. The remaining 4 passengers, including Christian, Finja, Marcus, and the pilot, remained missing but were presumed dead. The ocean offered few answers. As news of the crash spread, the reaction in Germany and beyond was one of profound shock. RSG Group issued a somber statement acknowledging the tragedy, and the German Foreign Office confirmed it was working closely with Costa Rican authorities. The cause of the crash remains unknown, and no mechanical failure or pilot error has yet been officially identified. Flight safety experts, however, noted the challenges of operating such a jet with a single pilot, especially during a complex descent phase in poor weather. The crash marked the sudden and complete loss of a family, a business leader, and those who had accompanied him on what should have been a routine flight. What began as a journey between 2 countries ended in a quiet stretch of ocean, with fragments of lives scattered across the waves. Today, only the wreckage and silence remain. The investigation continues, but for the families left behind and a company now mourning its founder, the answers may never be enough. It was February 22, 2025 in San Pedro, Belize. 3 American women, Kautar Nakad, 23, Imani Mala, 24, and Wafai El-Arar, 26, were found unresponsive in their room at the Royal Cahal Beach Resort, a luxury hotel known for attracting tourists. The group had planned to fly back home to Massachusetts the next day. They had been healthy and excited about their trip. Friends described them as kind, smart, and full of energy. It seemed like a normal vacation, until everything took a sudden and unexplained turn. On February 21st, hotel staff noticed something odd. None of the women had been seen since the previous day. Surveillance footage confirmed that they had entered their suite on Friday and never came out. Housekeeping knocked, but got no response. They returned the next morning and, after several attempts, entered the room. What they found was disturbing. All 3 women were inside and unresponsive. First responders noted signs that suggested something sudden and serious had happened. Although emergency services arrived quickly, all 3 were pronounced dead at the scene. Belize police launched an investigation. Police Commissioner Chester Williams gave a public statement saying alcohol, vape pens, and gummies were found in the room. He added that nothing illegal had been discovered, but suggested the women may have reacted badly to something they consumed. Their families and friends were outraged. They felt the explanation didn't match the people they knew. They didn't believe the women would have used anything harmful and thought the commissioner's statement was rushed and unfair. An initial autopsy in Belize found that each woman had died from acute pulmonary edema, meaning fluid had filled their lungs. But this still didn't answer what caused the condition. Their bodies were flown to Massachusetts for a second autopsy. Weeks passed with no clear answers. Then in early March, new information surfaced. A woman using the name Jane had checked into the Royal Cahal with her friends on March 1st, shortly after the deaths. Concerned about safety, she contacted the hotel beforehand. A representative named Daniel reassured her there were no ongoing risks and referred to the deaths as a one-time substance-related tragedy. Jane believed him. But on the 5th day of her stay, she woke up with her left leg numb, dizziness, and blurry vision. She collapsed while trying to stand and couldn't move for nearly 40 minutes. Later, she continued experiencing confusion, headaches, and vision issues, even after returning home. At the time, Jane didn't know what caused it. But after reading about a possible carbon monoxide leak, things started to make sense. Carbon monoxide is an invisible, odorless gas that can leak from fuel-powered appliances. It causes symptoms like dizziness, numbness, and confusion, and can be fatal at high levels. Jane reported her experience to the U.S. Embassy. A friend was later told that some rooms at the resort had dangerously high carbon monoxide levels. But the embassy didn't release a public statement, only saying they were working with local authorities. Around the same time, another guest named Nakwana H. posted a review. She had stayed at the hotel just before the women were found. Her carbon monoxide detector had gone off, showing a reading above 400 parts per million, a dangerous level. When she reported it to staff, they seemed unsure how to respond. Under growing pressure, Belizean officials ran environmental tests. This time, they found that some rooms had readings as high as 500 parts per million, far above what is safe. On March 26, authorities confirmed that the cause of death was carbon monoxide exposure. Toxicology results showed that each woman had more than 60% carboxyhemoglobin in their blood, confirming fatal exposure. No other harmful substances were found in their systems. The families released a joint statement expressing their heartbreak and frustration. They asked for better handling of cases like this in the future and pushed for answers on how such a danger had been missed. The Royal Cahal Beach Resort later closed its doors. Kautar, Imani, and Wafai didn't lose their lives by chance. Their deaths were the result of something silent but entirely preventable. Their families are still waiting for full accountability, and they hope this never happens to anyone else. It was January 5, 2009 in Blaubeuren, Germany. The temperature had dropped to negative 15 degrees Celsius. That evening, 74-year-old billionaire Adolf Merkel left his house around 5 p.m. He told his wife Ruth that he needed to stop by the office. It seemed like a normal evening. He got into his Volkswagen Golf and drove off, but Merkel never made it to his office. Instead, he drove about 2 miles to a quiet railway embankment. Despite the heavy snow and freezing cold, he left his car, climbed the slope, and walked toward the tracks. That would be the last time anyone saw him alive. Later that night, the crew of a passing train noticed something unusual. A second train was sent to check, and they found a man's body on the tracks. It was Adolf Merkel. Nearby, his car was still parked, and inside was a note with just 2 words, "I'm sorry." His family had already reported him missing, and officials later confirmed that there had been no foul play. Still, the question remained, how did a billionaire end up like this? To understand, we have to look at his past. Adolf Merkel was born on March 18, 1934 in Dresden. During World War II, his family fled the Sudetenland and settled in Blaubeuren. He studied law but left that path early. In 1967, he took over a small family pharmaceutical company with just 80 employees. By 1973, he had founded Ratiopharm, Germany's first generic drug maker. The business grew quickly. Over the years, he built a massive corporate empire. He owned Heidelberg Cement, one of the largest cement companies in the world, and Phoenix Pharmahandel, a leading drug distributor in Europe. He also invested in industrial equipment and managed everything under his private firm, VM Vermogensverwaltung. At its peak, his businesses made around 35 billion euros a year and employed more than 100,000 people. In 2008, Forbes listed him as the 94th richest person in the world, with a fortune worth $9.2 billion. Despite his wealth, Merkel lived modestly. He kept a low profile, enjoyed mountain climbing and skiing, and often traveled to places like the Andes and Himalayas. But the global financial crisis in 2008 brought serious problems. His company, VEM, had taken on large loans using stock as collateral. When the market crashed and stock prices fell by more than 75%, the banks demanded repayment. Merkel had personally backed those loans, putting his entire fortune at risk. Things got worse when he made a high-risk investment in Volkswagen stock. He expected the price to fall and bet against it. But in October 2008, Porsche announced it owned far more Volkswagen shares than expected. This led to a short squeeze, and Volkswagen stock surged from around 210 euros to over 1,000 euros in just 2 days. Merkel personally lost about 500 million euros. It was one of the biggest personal losses in German financial history. Public criticism followed. The media portrayed him as reckless. Still, he pushed forward, negotiating with more than 30 banks to save his businesses. On January 4, 2009, just 1 day before his death, he secured a 400 million euro loan. But the deal meant he had to give up Ratiopharm, Heidelberg Cement, and Phoenix Pharmahandel. A previous loan of the same amount had been blocked just a month earlier. By early January, his businesses had lost about half their value. The pressure was immense. Those who knew him described him differently. Some said he was a loyal family man. Others remembered him as strict and private. His company rarely shared its financial data. Still, he had received Germany's highest civilian award in 2005 and had been given multiple honorary doctorates. On January 6th, his family released a statement saying the financial pressure and sense of helplessness had overwhelmed him. His passing shocked the country. Stock prices in his companies dropped, but bank talks continued. Prosecutors confirmed no one else was involved. Adolf Merkel spent his life building a quiet empire, but in the end, the pressure of losing it all became too much. 2004, in Newport Beach, California. Thomas and Jackie Hawks, both in their late 50s, had spent the last 2 years living aboard their 55-foot yacht, well-deserved. They had sailed across the Pacific Ocean and the Gulf of California, enjoying life at sea. But with a new grandchild on the way, they were ready to sell the boat and settle down. Unfortunately, things didn't turn out the way they had hoped. Thomas was a retired probation officer and former bodybuilder. He had 2 sons, Matt and Ryan, from a previous marriage. Jackie, his second wife, had helped raise them. When Matt announced he was going to be a father, the couple decided to return home and list their yacht for sale. That's when Skylar DeLeon contacted them, bringing his pregnant wife and young daughter. The Hawks were cautious but felt reassured by the family. DeLeon claimed he had money and once acted on Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, hiding his past armed burglary conviction and darker intentions. He scheduled a sea trial for November 15th but brought 2 men, ex-jail guard Alonzo McChain and former gang member John Fitzgerald Kennedy. The Hawks didn't know them but trusted DeLeon. That morning, all 5 boarded the yacht and headed out to sea. It was the last time Thomas and Jackie were seen. According to court records, once they were far enough from the shore, things turned violent. The couple was restrained with duct tape and gagged. Thomas was forced to sign paperwork giving DeLeon control over the yacht and financial matters. After that, Thomas and Jackie were tied to a 66-pound anchor and pushed overboard while still alive. Their bodies were never found. When Well-Deserved returned without them, family members became alarmed. The couple had always stayed in contact, especially with a new baby on the way. On November 26th, their sons reported them missing. Investigators later discovered someone had tried to access their bank account from Mexico. DeLeon claimed he had purchased the yacht and that the Hawks had driven away with the money. He presented a signed bill of sale and a notary's signature, but the notary later admitted he was paid to lie. Soon after, the Hawks' car was found abandoned near a mobile home park linked to DeLeon. In March 2005, McChain confessed to police and told them everything. With his help, police arrested DeLeon, Jennifer, and Kennedy. Investigators learned that DeLeon had also taken the life of a man named John Jarvie a year earlier after convincing him to invest $50,000. That case had remained unsolved until then. Prosecutors said DeLeon's plan to kill the Hawks was premeditated, aiming to steal their yacht to fund personal goals, including gender transition. Jennifer brought their child to gain the couple's trust. In 2006, Jennifer got life without parole. Kennedy was sentenced to death in 2009. McChain, who cooperated, received 20 years. DeLeon, born John Julius Jacobson Jr., had a troubled past and brief stints in acting and the Marines. In 2008, he admitted to all 3 murders and was sentenced to death. While in prison, DeLeon began hormone therapy, changed his name and gender in 2019, and underwent surgery in 2023. To this day, the bodies of Thomas and Jackie Hawks have never been recovered. Their sons lost both parents, and the yacht was later sold. Their story was featured on 20/20 in an episode titled Overboard. Skylar DeLeon and John Fitzgerald Kennedy remain on death row. Jennifer is serving life in Chowchilla, and McChain is at Valley State Prison. Another associate, Myron Gardner, served 4 years as an accessory. What happened on Well-Deserved wasn't chance. It was planned from the start, ending in heartbreak that no one saw coming. December 3, 1999, in Monaco. Inside one of the country's most high-security penthouses, a fire broke out. The apartment belonged to Edmund J. Safra, a 67-year-old billionaire banker suffering from Parkinson's disease. Safra was known around the world for his wealth, influence, and intense need for privacy. That night, he and one of his nurses died in the fire. But it wasn't an accident. The fire had been set on purpose by someone already inside. Edmund Safra was born on August 6, 1932, in Beirut, Lebanon. His family was part of the Sephardic Jewish community with roots in Aleppo, Syria. His father, Jacob Safra, had founded J.E. Safra Bank in 1920. Edmund joined the business at a young age. By 16, he was already working with currency and precious metals. In 1949, the family moved to Italy. That same year, Edmund made $40 million through gold trading. He used the money to start a new bank in Geneva called Trade Development Bank. He kept its records in ancient Arabic script to honor his heritage. By 1952, the family had moved again, this time to Brazil. A few years later, Edmund went back to Switzerland and formally opened the Trade Development Bank. In 1966, he founded Republic National Bank of New York. With 80 branches, it became one of the largest in the area, trailing only Citigroup and Chase Manhattan. His empire continued expanding through Monaco, Luxembourg, and Switzerland. By the early 1990s, his net worth had reached $2.5 billion. He was one of the most powerful private bankers in the world, but his career wasn't without issues. In 1983, he sold Trade Development Bank to American Express for $450 million. Later, the company accused him of misconduct. He fought back, won the case, and received $8 million in damages, money he gave entirely to charity. In 1996, Safra helped start Hermitage Capital Management, which later became involved in Russian financial controversies. In 1998, during Russia's economic crisis, his New York bank lost nearly half its income from investments in Russian bonds. Still, Safra remained respected. He was known not only for banking but also for helping others. He gave generously to hospitals, schools, synagogues, and medical centers around the world. He also supported research institutions like the Weizmann Institute, Institut Pasteur, and the Michael J. Fox Foundation. Despite his public impact, he lived a very private life. His Monaco penthouse was more like a fortress, complete with steel walls, escape paths, and top-level security. In 1999, he sold his empire to HSBC for over $10 billion. That same year, he and his wife Lily became citizens of Monaco. By then, Parkinson's had made him fully reliant on care. One of his nurses was Ted Maher, a former U.S. Green Beret hired just weeks earlier. Maher reportedly felt overlooked by staff and wanted to gain Safra's trust. In the early hours of December 3rd, he set a small fire, hoping to stage a rescue and become a hero. But the plan failed. The fire spread fast. Safra and Nurse Vivian Torrenti locked themselves in the bathroom, fearing an attack. Unusually, Safra had no bodyguards on site that night. His wife Lily made it to safety on the balcony, but inside, firefighters couldn't get through the steel-reinforced walls in time. Safra and Torrenti died from smoke inhalation. At first, rumors pointed to outside attackers, but Maher's story soon fell apart. He eventually admitted he set the fire. In 2002, he was convicted of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 10 years. He escaped prison in 2003 but was caught and returned. He was released in 2007. In 2022, he was arrested again in Texas on unrelated charges. After Safra's death, most of his wealth went to charities. His wife continued his work until her passing in 2022. Today, the Edmund J. Safra Foundation supports hundreds of global projects. But the tragedy in Monaco is still remembered. A man known for controlling everything around him was undone not by an outsider, but by someone he let in. It was November 28, 1981, near California's Catalina Island. Natalie Wood, a 43-year-old award-nominated actress, had boarded the yacht Splendor for a weekend trip. She was joined by her husband, actor Robert Wagner, her Brainstorm co-star Christopher Walken, and the yacht's captain, Dennis Davern. The getaway was supposed to be quiet and relaxing, but overnight something went wrong. By the next morning, Natalie's body was found floating in the water. She was dressed in a nightgown, socks, and a down jacket. For years, her death was considered a tragic accident, but the story behind it is far more complicated and still unresolved. Natalie Wood was born Natalia Nikolaevna Zakharenko on July 20, 1938 in San Francisco. Her mother, Maria, strongly believed in a fortune-teller's warning that her daughter would be famous, but should always stay away from dark water. Natalie became famous as a child, starring in Miracle on 34th Street by age 8. She later earned multiple Oscar nominations, including one for Rebel Without a Cause. She dated big names like Elvis Presley and had a long on-and-off relationship with Robert Wagner. They married in 1957, divorced 5 years later, then remarried in 1972. Together, they had a daughter. By the early 1980s, Natalie's career had slowed, but she remained well-known. She had just finished filming Brainstorm with Christopher Walken, and some on set believed they had grown unusually close. This led to rumors that created tension between her and Wagner. The Thanksgiving weekend trip in 1981 was meant to be peaceful, but according to Davern and others, things were tense from the beginning. Davern claimed Wagner was uneasy about how much time Natalie and Walken spent together. On the island, Natalie and Walken stayed at a bar for hours before Wagner arrived, reportedly already angry. That night, the group had dinner at Doug's Harbor Reef. Witnesses remembered drinks flowing and someone breaking a glass during an argument. Around 10 p.m., they returned to the yacht. That's when things escalated. According to Davern, the group kept drinking on board. At one point, Wagner accused Walken of getting too close to Natalie and smashed a wine bottle on the table. Walken walked off to his cabin while Natalie and Wagner returned to theirs. Davern then heard shouting from the deck, followed by silence. When he checked, Natalie was gone. Wagner said she had taken the dinghy, but Davern found that strange. Natalie was known to be afraid of water and wouldn't have left on her own. Davern suggested turning on the lights or calling for help, but said Wagner refused. Authorities weren't contacted until 1:30 a.m., over 4 hours later. At 8 a.m. the next day, Natalie's body was found about a mile from the boat. A dinghy was also located nearby. Her autopsy showed bruises and a facial cut, but her death was ruled accidental drowning. However, many close to Natalie doubted this. Her sister Lana said Natalie would never go near the water alone at night. Over time, witnesses began sharing stories that contradicted the original investigation. In 2011, Davern admitted he hadn't told the full truth earlier. He now believed Wagner was involved. A woman on a nearby boat claimed to have heard a woman screaming for help between 11 p.m. and 11:30 p.m. Another witness, who was 17 at the time, said he heard yelling and cries from the water. Other stories also raised questions. One woman said she saw Wagner act aggressively toward Natalie years earlier. Another witness remembered Natalie showing up frightened at their home in the 1950s. saying she feared what Wagner might do. These statements caused authorities to reopen the case in 2011. In 2012, Natalie's cause of death was updated to drowning and other undetermined factors. By 2018, Wagner was officially named a person of interest. Investigators noted his story had changed and didn't align with other witness accounts. Lieutenant John Corina said Wagner was the last person seen with Natalie and that his story didn't add up. Wagner, now 95, has never spoken to investigators since being named a person of interest. He denies any wrongdoing. Walken, meanwhile, cooperated. In a past interview, he described the situation as a terrible accident, but he has never offered many details. The case remains open. No one has been charged, but those closest to Natalie continue to search for answers. After 4 decades, what really happened to Natalie Wood on that yacht still isn't clear. The morning of November 22, 2023, just before Thanksgiving. The weather was cold, and the roads were busy with travelers heading out for the holiday. At the Rainbow Bridge border crossing near Niagara Falls, cars moved slowly through inspection booths between the United States and Canada. Everything seemed normal. Then, just before 11:30 a.m., something unexpected happened. A silver Bentley Flying Spur suddenly sped down Niagara Street at a dangerously high speed. It crossed an intersection, slightly swerved, then hit a median with full force. The car launched into the air and crashed straight into a border inspection booth. The explosion was huge. Witnesses described a loud blast and a massive fireball. Smoke and debris filled the area. The car was destroyed beyond recognition. Border agents rushed in. Authorities shut down the entire area, closing all 4 U.S.-Canada border crossings. News outlets scrambled to report, and social media lit up with panic. At first, many feared it was an attack, but as more details came out, the story took a different turn. It wasn't planned, but it was still horrifying. 2 days later, the victims were identified as Kurt and Monica Villani, both 53 from Grand Island, New York, just 10 miles away. Married since 1995, they were known in their community for running Gooey's Lumber, a local hardware business with 7 locations across western New York. They were respected, kind, and generous. That morning, they were on their way to see a Kiss concert in Toronto. Before heading to the border, they had stopped at the Seneca Niagara Resort and Casino. The concert had been canceled just hours earlier, but the couple likely didn't know. The car they were in wasn't ordinary. The 2022 Bentley Flying Spur is a high-performance luxury vehicle. It can go from 0 to 60 miles per hour in under 4 seconds and weighs over 5,100 pounds. Used models sell for more than $200,000. It's built for speed, not for regular city streets. Footage from border security cameras showed the Bentley flying past slower traffic before hitting the curb and launching. The crash injured a border officer inside the booth, but they survived with minor injuries. The Villanis died instantly as their car caught fire. Nothing could be done. From the time they turned onto Niagara Street to the moment of impact, only about 30 seconds had passed. In that time, the car sped through several intersections and ran at least 4 red lights. It narrowly missed hitting other vehicles. The FBI quickly ruled out any intent or criminal involvement. It was declared an accident, but people were still left wondering what caused the car to accelerate like that. Weeks before, Kurt had told friends he thought something was wrong with the gas pedal. No other details were shared, and it's unclear if it was inspected. Bentley Motors hasn't commented. The 2022 model had 3 recalls, but none involved acceleration. In 2021, there had been a recall involving gas pedals, but only for right-hand drive cars overseas, not this one. A road safety engineer later reviewed the footage and noticed a dark vapor trail behind the car, likely from the tires. This suggested Kurt was braking hard, awake, alert, and trying to stop. The Villanis left behind 2 adult children, 26-year-old Kurt Jr., a former youth hockey standout, and 27-year-old Mia. The family had a long history in the area, known for acts of generosity. In 2014, Kurt and his father gave away 250 turkeys for Thanksgiving. The Villanis often helped neighbors and supported community projects. Sadly, this wasn't the family's first tragedy. In 1978, Kurt's grandmother died in a boating accident on the Niagara River. A bridge that wasn't properly lit caused the crash. The family later won a lawsuit. The crash has raised questions about whether such fast cars belong on public roads. Even with advanced features, not all high-performance systems can prevent disaster, especially at those speeds. In the US, there are still no rules requiring automatic speed control. In under a minute, a luxury car turned into a fireball. 2 lives were lost, and a community is still left searching for answers. And it all happened in less than 60 seconds. August 12, 2014, in Nusa Dua, Bali. At the high-end St. Regis Resort, 62-year-old Sheila Van Wees Mack was on vacation with her daughter, 18-year-old Heather Mack. Sheila, a well-known figure in Chicago's elite social circles, was the widow of jazz composer James L. Mack. Their trip was meant to be a chance to reconnect. Instead, it ended in a shocking case involving 2 young Americans overseas. Heather, who was pregnant, wasn't alone. She had secretly used her mother's credit card to fly out her boyfriend, 21-year-old Tommy Schaefer. Sheila had strongly opposed their relationship and had tried for months to separate them. She even sold her home and moved to a new area in Chicago in an effort to distance Heather from Tommy. It's believed Sheila hoped this Bali trip would convince Heather to end her pregnancy, but the opposite happened. That night, hotel security footage showed Sheila and Tommy arguing in the lobby. What followed wasn't spontaneous. It was the result of a plan that had been forming for months. Back in Chicago, Heather and Tommy had already talked about ending Sheila's life. They even discussed methods and once offered $50,000 to Tommy's cousin to find someone to carry it out. Text messages later presented in court showed Heather was deeply involved in the planning. Money and control played a major role. Heather believed that removing Sheila could give her independence and possibly access to millions. Reports say Tommy was told the inheritance might be as much as $11 million. According to Tommy, during an argument, Sheila threatened to harm the unborn baby. He claimed that's when he snapped. He struck her repeatedly with a metal fruit bowl. Forensic findings showed Sheila had severe facial injuries and suffocated. Heather helped clean up. They wrapped Sheila's body in a bedsheet, placed her into a suitcase, and accidentally broke her neck in the process. They wheeled the suitcase through the resort, got a taxi, and loaded the blood-stained bag into the trunk. But their plan quickly unraveled. The taxi driver saw blood leaking from the suitcase and alerted hotel staff, who called police. Before they could leave, Heather and Tommy fled to a nearby hotel, but were caught the next day. This wasn't a sudden breakdown. Between 2010 and 2013, police had been called to their home 86 times for domestic issues and missing persons, mostly involving Heather. She had even been placed in juvenile detention and on psychiatric hold. Despite everything, Sheila never stopped supporting Heather. Her brother, Bill Weiss, said Sheila believed Heather could still change. During the trip, Sheila had taken painkillers after a fall and stayed in her room. That's when Heather bought Tommy a business-class ticket to Bali. Hours after he arrived, Sheila was dead. Heather and Tommy were arrested and charged with premeditated murder. Heather gave birth to her daughter, Stella, while in prison. Tommy was sentenced to 18 years. Heather got 10. Some were shocked at how light her sentence was. Later, it was revealed that $150,000 from Sheila's estate was used to fund Heather's legal defense. In prison, Heather lived a relatively comfortable life, joining dance groups, learning languages, and becoming a translator. Tommy, meanwhile, was isolated and reportedly mistreated. He later expressed deep regret. In a 2019 interview, Heather claimed Sheila had mistreated her, but records showed a different story, one where Sheila tried to keep Heather from spiraling further. In 2017, Heather posted a disturbing video saying she didn't regret what happened. It shocked many. Heather was released early in 2021 for good behavior, but when she returned to the United States, she was arrested again. Now 29, she was sentenced to 26 years in federal prison. At the hearing, she apologized to her family. Her Uncle Bill said it was the first time she had done so, but added that it was hard to know if she meant it. Stella, Heather's daughter, now lives in Colorado with Sheila's niece, Lisa. She no longer wants contact with Heather. After years of legal battles, Heather gave up her inheritance, allowing the money to go to Stella. Tommy is still serving time in Indonesia. Heather is in a U.S. federal prison, and Stella, now 10, is doing her best to live a normal life far away from the tragedy. May 10th, 2025, in northern Spain. A British couple, aged 78 and 58, were driving a black Ferrari 488 GTB along the mountainous N621 highway in León. They were part of a group of around 20 British Ferrari owners traveling together as part of a high-end rally. The car, worth over $400,000, could reach speeds up to 205 miles per hour. This wasn't just a sightseeing trip. It was a carefully planned event for luxury car enthusiasts. The N621 is known both for its beautiful mountain scenery and for being dangerous. The road runs through steep terrain with sharp turns, sudden drops, and narrow stretches. While it offers amazing views, it requires extra attention, especially in a high-performance car like the Ferrari 488 GTB. The group had arrived in the city of Lyon the day before. Everyone was looking forward to a scenic weekend drive. But by early afternoon on May 10th, things went terribly wrong. At 1:47 p.m., emergency services were alerted. A vehicle had gone off the road and fallen into the Uso River. Witnesses reported that it lost control on a curve and disappeared over the edge. The car landed upside down in shallow water, with 2 people trapped inside. First responders rushed to the scene. The civil guard arrived quickly, followed by firefighters and medical teams. The area was difficult to reach. Dense trees, underbrush, and uneven ground surrounded the river. Firefighters had to cut through the vegetation to get close. When they reached the Ferrari, it was heavily damaged. The roof had collapsed, and the car was flipped, resting halfway submerged in the river. Debris was scattered across the area. Rescue teams worked for more than 6 hours to reach and recover the car and its occupants. Emergency crews had to remove the doors to safely take the bodies out. Only after that was the car turned upright. It was a slow and difficult process due to the damage and the setting. Though the names of the couple were not released, officials confirmed they were British. The vehicle had a UK license plate, and they were part of the rally. Witnesses said the Ferrari had been speeding shortly before the crash and was alone at the time. No other cars were involved. Investigators haven't determined the exact cause. Some believe the car may have lost control on a turn. Others suggested the driver may have suffered a sudden health issue. A local expert noted that a car with 700 horsepower demands careful handling, especially on roads like the N621. Photos from the scene showed the wrecked Ferrari in the quiet river, surrounded by greenery. The stillness of the water stood in contrast to the violence of the crash. Emergency workers described the recovery as emotionally difficult. Spending hours in the river, trying to retrieve 2 people who couldn't be saved, left a strong impact. The UK's Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office confirmed the deaths and said they were assisting the victims' families. By the next day, the story had made headlines across Europe. Reactions poured in online, from shock to condolences. Authorities are still reviewing the scene, the road conditions, and the car itself. It's unclear whether the couple passed away from the impact or from being stuck underwater. This wasn't the first tragic accident involving British tourists in Spain. Just months earlier, a woman had been seriously injured in Menorca, and 2 men died in a separate crash involving a speedboat. But this accident stood out. A scenic rally, a powerful car, and a challenging road all came together in the worst way. The Ferrari was removed from the river later that evening, and investigations are ongoing. Whatever caused the crash, whether it was the road, speed, or something else, 2 lives were lost. For the people who knew them, and for the emergency crews who tried to help, this road will now be remembered for something far more tragic than its beauty. It was a cold Sunday morning in 2013, deep in the Arctic Circle. A Eurocopter EC-120 had just landed by the Rinda River in Russia's Kola Peninsula. This remote area is known for being one of the world's most exclusive salmon fishing spots, where wealthy tourists pay thousands for a private, peaceful experience. On board were 3 men: Rupert Beaumont, a retired lawyer from London, and Mark Robertson, a fine art dealer, both 69 years old, and their 53-year-old Russian guide, Alexander Tushnikov, an experienced Arctic expedition leader. They had flown from England for what was described as the ultimate fishing trip, but the moment they stepped out of the helicopter, everything went wrong. The Eurocopter was chosen for its safety and reliability, especially compared to older Russian aircraft. June marked peak fishing season, when the rivers were finally accessible after months of ice. The helicopter landed near Renda Lodge, a luxury camp popular among foreign anglers. The pilot, 25-year veteran Alexander Shabalin, touched down in a marshy area near the river. The plan was for the group to start their fishing trip from there, but the ground was too soft. One of the wheels sank into the wet terrain, causing the helicopter to tip sharply. The rotor blades, still spinning, dropped low and struck all three men. Rupert, Mark, and Alexander were killed instantly. They never had a chance. A second helicopter carrying other guests, including Rupert's son James, was just behind them. From the air, James watched the entire incident unfold. He saw the helicopter tip and witnessed his father lose his life. The crash site was chaotic. Photos showed the helicopter on its side, its rotors shattered. Investigators said the soft ground likely caused the tilt. The pilot survived with minor injuries and made a distress call shortly after, but it was already too late for the others. At first, there was speculation about possible mechanical failure or bad weather, but attention quickly turned to possible human error. Russia's investigative committee launched a full investigation, looking into whether the pilot made a mistake during landing or takeoff. Reports later surfaced that the pilot may have given misleading statements about what had happened. A criminal case was opened, and the pilot was being investigated for breaking air safety rules that led to multiple deaths. If found responsible, he could face up to 10 years in prison. Russia's aviation agency confirmed the helicopter tipped after landing, and one report claimed it struck the victims while trying to take off. Experts pointed to the possibility that the landing spot was too unstable despite the crew's experience. Rupert Beaumont wasn't just any tourist. He was a senior partner at Slaughter and May, one of London's most respected law firms. He had worked on major cases, including the fallout of the Barings Bank scandal in the 1990s. Friends described him as sharp, kind, and warm, a man who loved fishing, golf, and bridge. Mark Robertson, his friend, was a fine art dealer. Not much is known about his personal life, but his family shared their grief through the Foreign Office. Their guide, Alexander Tushnikov, was respected in the fishing community and had worked with international tourists for years. All three died instantly. News of the tragedy spread quickly. The British Foreign Office confirmed the deaths and issued condolences. Families asked for privacy. Rupert's wife, Susie, who was in Australia at the time, returned to the United Kingdom before heading to Russia to be with their son James. The Kola Peninsula had become a top destination for elite anglers. The helicopters used were considered modern and the pilots were highly trained. But on that day, something went fatally wrong. Whether it was pilot judgment or the terrain itself, 3 lives were lost in seconds. A peaceful fishing trip turned into an unimaginable tragedy in one of the most isolated places on Earth. 6, 2014 in Nice, France. 77-year-old Helene Pastor had just finished visiting her son Gildo at Larche Hospital. He was recovering after a stroke. Like always, she left in her dark Lancia Voyager van with her longtime driver, Mohammed Darowich. But this routine trip would not end like the others. Just after 7 p.m., as they were leaving the hospital parking lot, a man dressed in dark clothes and wearing a ski mask appeared. He had a sawed-off shotgun. Without saying anything, he walked up to the van and started shooting. Both Helene and Mohammed were hit. The attack was quick and clearly planned. The man fired several shots, then ran to a nearby getaway car. Mohammed was seriously wounded in the face, neck, and stomach. Helene had injuries to her face, chest, and stomach. They were rushed to St. Roch Hospital. Mohammed passed away on May 11. Helene briefly woke from a coma 5 days after the shooting and told police she was scared and had more to share. But she died from her injuries on May 21st. This was not a random act. It was a carefully planned attack on one of Monaco's most powerful women. Helene Pastor was part of one of the richest families in Monaco. Her grandfather, Jean-Baptiste Pastor, had moved there from Italy in 1880. Over time, the family built a real estate empire, second only to the royal family. Helene managed important properties like La Bahia, Emily Palace, and the Gildo Pastor Center. She earned millions in rent each year, and her family's total fortune was estimated to be over 20 billion euros. She had 2 children, Sylvia from her first marriage, and Gildo from her second marriage to Claude Palanca. Even with all this wealth, Helene preferred to keep a low profile. She often walked her dog and drove around in a London taxi. She avoided the spotlight. Her death shook the entire country. Monaco is known for being safe and wealthy. Even Prince Albert II came to her funeral. Police began working right away. There was a lot of evidence. In Marseille, over 200 kilometers away, cameras had caught 2 men buying cell phones and taking a train to Nice. DNA was found on a bottle of shower gel in a hotel room. They had watched Helene at the hospital and had planned to escape on a scooter but used a taxi instead. One investigator said, "They made every mistake, including showing up in a taxi." The man who pulled the trigger was 28-year-old Samin Said Ahmed from the Comoros Islands. His partner, Alher Hamadi, was 35. Both lived in Marseille. They denied everything, but there was strong proof: DNA, phone records, security videos, and hotel logs. Then the case took an unexpected turn. Police arrested Wojciech Janowski, Sylwia's longtime partner. Janowski was well known in Monaco. Born in Poland, he was the honorary Polish consul, ran a nanotech business, worked in oil, and supported charities, including one linked to Princess Charlene. He even won a national award in 2010. But things weren't what they seemed. His businesses were failing. He had faked a Cambridge degree. Even though Pastor gave him and Sylvia up to 500,000 euros each month, it wasn't enough. Investigators believed he wanted full access to her wealth, which was over 10 billion euros. In June 2014, Janowski admitted everything. He said he asked his personal trainer, Pascal Doriac, to find someone to help with the plan. Doriac brought in his brother-in-law, who then contacted the men who carried it out. The total payment was 250,000 euros. Later, Janowski denied the confession, claiming he misunderstood the police. But Doriac gave a full statement. He said Janowski called Helene a monster and had even visited the hospital to check the scene. In 2018, Janowski and 9 others went on trial. Sylvia attended but was cleared of involvement. The court learned how the whole plan came together and how it all pointed back to Janowski's financial problems. In October 2018, Janowski was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. What looked like a quiet, wealthy life in Monaco was hiding a deep betrayal, one that ended with the loss of a woman who built an empire but trusted the wrong person.